Do you ever find the perfect layout online and you just want to scrap lift it, but it's only a single page layout and you have a ton of photos that you want to squeeze on there? Well, today I'm going to walk you through my process using this beautiful layout by my friend Jayma Malme, and I'm going to show you how I take her single page layout and turn it into a double page. We're actually celebrating Jayma right now because she's reached her 20,000 subscriber milestone here on YouTube. There's been a bunch of videos this past week and even more to come this upcoming week. So I'll make sure to link the playlist at the end of today's video so you can go check them out. Now, Jayma kind of blew my mind when I first saw this layout. She made it a few months ago because she used the Marbled Elegance collection. Now, this was originally released as a Valentine's release, and I just couldn't really see past that theme. Even though it's not covered in hearts or anything, the backgrounds are pretty subtle tone-on-tone type patterns, so it could work for a lot of different things. But when Jayma used it for her Hawaii photos, I was blown away and I knew at some point I had to scrap lift this. So I'm going to start off with a white base just like she has, and then I'll start laying out my photos and figuring out what we're going to do for that second page. Of course, I am starting off with my white cardstock base. And now, instead of a row of 3x4 photos, I thought it'd be fun to do an enlargement. I'd actually taken a panoramic shot. If you've never used panorama setting on your iPhone, you switch over to pano mode, you hold down the button, and you slowly move your phone along whatever you're trying to capture. And the trickiest part is trying to keep it level. There's a little line that helps you keep it level, but you can get some really cool scenery shots. So I printed this. It's just a little over 5 inches by 11 because that's the length of my paper. I can't go any bigger than that. So I am going to have some of the pattern paper showing on the sides, which is fine. And then I thought about adding another photo here just to create like a nice little nook in here. I really wanted to use this photo, but I also wanted to create a little spot for my embellishments. Now, one of my go-to things when I'm working with like a single page layout, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to translate that on a second page, is to make a grid of photos. I mean, a grid is good anytime, but I think especially when you're trying to coordinate with another page, it just keeps your photo placement easy. So this one is about 9 1/4 long and 7 1/4 high. And those measurements really are just based off of how many photos I wanted to use and kind of how the different orientations came together. Now on Jayma's layout, she has ripped paper. So she has strips of ripped paper kind of layered together and torn. So they have that nice ruffly edge. And it's basically just a thick band that's going across her layout. And then she has 3 spots of embellishment. So one here, and then another little one down here. So one popular option when you're trying to turn a layout into a 2-page layout is to just mirror exactly what you have on here for paper placement onto the next one. So I could have a strip and layered ripped paper and just do it straight across. So I would have one big band going all the way across. If I was going to do that, I might have preferred to do my photos like this, so they came down a little bit more, or even make it, instead of a rectangle, try and do more of a square grid. But I think what I want to do on here is take that idea of the ripped strips and just rotate it and actually have those strips kind of end cap this layout. So we're going to repeat the exact same papers I use on here and keep the same order, but put them over on this side. Now I can play with different thicknesses. A lot of this middle part is going to be hidden because of my photos. And instead of having all 3 of my clusters for a visual triangle on this page, I want to extend that over onto this page so that with both pages, I have a visual triangle. It will help the pages flow together a little bit better if it's not disjointed. So if I still did the 3 clusters over here and then added another couple clusters over here, I could do that. It could work, but I think it's going to be a little bit too busy. And I think it will flow a little bit better and be a little bit more balanced and read as one cohesive layout if I have my 3 points of embellishment like that. I can always add like some journaling or phrase stickers or something like that, something small to this top corner if I want to, just so that there's nothing up there, but we'll see when we get to that point if it needs anything. This is a process, right? We make decisions as we go, and I think sometimes if you try and make too many decisions at the beginning and you get ahead of yourself, it actually makes things more difficult. Sometimes it's better to do one thing, see how you like it, and then make your next decision. That's usually how I end up making my pages, just one choice at a time until I get to a place where I'm happy. Okay, next step is we need to pick paper. So I'm going to do that on this side because I think it'll be a little bit easier. Now, the kind of bigger piece that Jayma used was this one here. So that's the one that would go behind my photo. And it's actually going to show even more than it did on her layout because I have the sides here that are going to show. And she did use some cardstock. So she had the pretty and pink cardstock in behind that one. And then she had one of these papers. I think she used the red and the pink, if I remember correctly. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. I think that works well because the dress does have a red and a pink in it. Let's look and see if I use the pattern that has just the pink, what that looks like. I think that would work well too. It is very pink at that point. And I kind of like the contrast with the red in it. You know what? I really think the paper that Jayma chose was the perfect one. I think that's my favorite as well. So why try and reinvent the wheel? Let's go with the same paper that Jayma used. Now, I don't think I'm really going to measure a whole bunch. I think I'm just going to go ahead and start ripping. And then I'll put my photo on top and use that as my guide to figure out just where I need to cut it or rip it. I have quite a big white section here. Now, this is different than how Jayma did hers. Hers hardly had any white, but I'm going to try it, see how I like it. I can always go back in and rip this down so that I don't have that big white bit there. And then Jayma has hers kind of smaller up this end and then gets bigger down here. All right, I ripped off some of that excess white because it was just getting a little out of control there. And let's have a look without these other papers back here and just see how that looks on the layout. I want to keep in mind that I'm going to do an embellishment cluster here, so I do want to leave myself some room at the top, but I don't need to leave a ton of room down here because I'm not doing the third cluster like Jayma did on hers. So it's actually better that it comes a little bit farther down. I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to cut some strips of the pretty and pink cardstock. All right, I have my strips here. The ones that I'm doing at the top, I am just cutting them and ripping them like straight across. I'm not adding like an angle or anything to them, keeping them pretty much straight across. And I'm going to continue that with this one here as well. I will play around with placement and how much I want them sticking out. The more I look at it, I think I do want to get rid of this white edge because for the pretty and pink, I don't have the two-tone cardstock of that one, which means this is the dyed all the way through cardstock. And so it doesn't match as far as having white showing on all 3 layers. And I don't like how that looks all together. So I think if I kind of get rid of that white, just rip it really close, I think I will like that a little bit better. I also think I want to make this a little bit smaller. I think I want to leave a little bit more white here and move all of this up. So now that I've decided that I don't really want that heavy white ripped edge, the best thing to do is instead of ripping this way, because I like to pull the paper towards me, that's the most comfortable. I'm usually always trying to expose that white edge. But the better idea is actually to start on the back side and pull towards me, because then that edge is going to be nice and clean. I don't have that white edge sticking out. You can also do it on this side by just ripping away from you, but I find that really awkward. I rather just flip it over to the other side and then I can rip more comfortably. All right, so I have this piece here. It's fairly narrow, ripped, it's about 1 inch. This one is about 1.5 1.25 inches, somewhere between there. And these are going to go over on this side. And then this was the leftover piece that I had ripped before. So it's on a bit of an angle, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. Since this is already ripped, it makes sense to use it up on this page rather than letting that go to waste. Okay, there we go. And then our mat is going to go over top like that. Now I definitely want to double mat this one. So these I actually printed at their size. So like I printed a 4x6, a 3x4. These ones I printed at 3x4 and then cut them down to 3x3. I could have made this collage digitally and just printed it out on a larger piece of paper, but I have way more 4x6 paper than I do 8.5x11. And now I want to find a color to put under here. So I have browns, greens, I have a little bit of orange and yellow, of course our pink and red, and then I also have some blue. And actually my dress is like a very dark bluish green color. So I was thinking maybe Secret Sea. This is a new in color. It's a very deep blue with a little bit of green in it. And to me, it kind of acts more like a neutral. It totally reminds me of Harbor from Close to My Heart. It's slightly more blue and not as green as Harbor was. But I was thinking it might work as a nice neutral. Not as harsh as black. It's a little bit softer, but it really helps this stand out on the page. And it does tie into the color of my dress. It's not as blue as my husband's shirt or the sky, but I don't think I want to bring in more of that blue sky. Now I feel like this side needs to somewhat match. Whatever you do to one page, do on the other. That will help keep things balanced. Now I have a white mat and a Secret Sea mat. I know I'm going to struggle calling it Secret Sea and not just call it Harbor all the time, so please forgive me if I slip up. But I think this will be a good way to bring that into this side of the layout. I can't mat this because I only have 8.5x11 in the Secret Sea color, and this one is 11 inches. I'm going to go ahead and stick these papers down off camera, and then we can get to the best part, the embellishing. While I was getting ready to stick this down, I decided to go ahead and reprint my photo. Sometimes things just don't translate the same once you get them down into that smaller format, and they just don't look as good as they did on the computer. Once it shrunk down to that 3x4, I felt like I could barely see her face, and I really wanted to capture her cute little expression and a bit more detail, since like my other photos are a little bit farther away. We have a profile view there. So I wanted to at least have one of her that was a bit closer, and I do like this better. I mean, the clouds looked really cool, and I actually cut the clouds out of that one too, which is too bad, but it was more important for me to see her face a little bit more clearly than to see the cool clouds. I also wanted to mention, while I am sticking all these together, how I go about doing that. So with this one, that's going to be my top one. I'm going to go ahead and put the adhesive along the ripped edge, nowhere else, just along the ripped edge, and I'll rotate it towards me so I can see it a little bit more clearly. And I'm going to use the edge of my paper to help line this up. And the adhesive is not going to be sticking to the white paper, which is good. It's just sticking onto the pink. And then same for this one, I will put the tape on here. And then we'll bring this down and figure out where we want this to be. The ones that are crooked are a little bit more tricky. That's all right. It's still possible to do. All right, so something else I wanted to mention is you could definitely try out different positions on your facing layout. I always tend to lean to end capping my layout because this is kind of like the heaviest part, visually the heaviest part. And by putting it on this side, I feel like it draws your eye over. You kind of start over here. I'm going to have my title over here, and it pulls your eye through the layout to the heaviness over here, if that makes sense. But you could play around with other locations for those papers. We could flip it here to the bottom. Sometimes it looks really nice if you have on the left page, kind of have a top piece and then just flip it right around and have it on the bottom. basically you're sort of rotating what you had over here onto this one. And I think this could look really nice too, because it almost looks like you're finishing off whatever was ripped here at the bottom, even though the layering is a bit different. But I think this could actually be a really beautiful option. One that I'm not as big a fan of is going on this side, because then I feel like it's not balanced. It's kind of all heavy, heavy, and then nothing. Like it doesn't pull your eyes right through. And then if we rotate this to the top, kind of the same thing. I feel like they're kind of fighting. It doesn't work as nicely, but I hope that makes a little bit more sense for figuring out on your own page how to figure out where to place paper on the second page. Of course, this is just one way to do it. There are definitely many other ways to create a coordinating second page. Okay, now comes the fun part. I did go ahead and do some prep for this because I'm planning on making some pretty cool embellishment clusters, and I find it way more fun to go ahead and prep my pieces ahead of time rather than when I'm trying to build it. If I know that I'm going to be using a lot, sometimes I don't really have a clue what I'm doing, so I just kind of do it as I go. But I'm following Jayma's layout. I'm doing a lot of the same embellishments as she did, plus I'm adding some extras. So I decided, since I'm doing pictures on the beach, I want to add some beachy elements. So I have some of these coral pieces from the Ocean Friends die set. This is such a beautiful die cut because it creates all these little dots on here, and I just think that is so beautiful. The way it kind of goes out, it layers beautifully. Everyone that I've seen use this one, they totally sold me on getting this die set just for that die alone. So I have some of those cut in white. And then for other beach elements, I have the Seaside Wishes sand dollars. I stamped these in pecan pie and I stamped off. I didn't know how many I would want, so I made 3 sets. Basically for this one, there is stamp and die. Some really nice dies in here as well. And then there is a 3D embossing folder, so you can actually die cut them and emboss them at the same time. However, I did not do that because I wanted to stamp them. So I stamped them first, and then I wanted to add that beautiful texture. I know it probably doesn't translate as good on camera, but it's really nice in person. So I stamped them first, and then I put them one by one into the embossing folder. I tried to do 2 at a time, but then I would have needed to tape them in place. So I just did one, pinch it together, run it through. And I always make sure to put the folded side of my embossing folder facing into the rollers of my Big Shot. And I do use the standard multi-purpose platform that it comes with both tabs down. And then I put my folder with the paper inside, and then my cutting plate. And it always helps if you have some of the cutting plate kind of ahead of the folder so the machine can suck that in first. Every machine is a little bit different. So if you're cranking it and it's just too tight, pull it out. You can always flip to tab number 1. Then you might need to add a little bit of cardstock to shim it, but some machines are tighter than others. If yours is fairly old, it might be a little bit looser and you might need to shim it to get enough pressure that way as well. If you guys have been thinking about getting this set, it is in the last chance section, and I see that it is low inventory. So you might want to grab that up before it's gone. Also from that set, I stamped some starfish. And I just did plenty because I didn't know how many I would want, and I figured these are elements that I'm going to keep using. So even if I have too many, that's fine. I love how these stamp. They do this kind of gradation. I did do second generation because I used one of the new colors of the year, which is Timid Tiger, and it stamps a little bit bolder. So I stamped off and then did the second generation stamping, and that gave me that perfect soft orange, which also ties into this little bit of orange in my photo. I didn't want it to be super bold because there's not a ton of orange on here. So I also did this Sprigs and Leaves. This is from Close to My Heart. I copied Jayma on this. She did the same thing. And actually I went ahead and stuck these down because they cut in two separate pieces. So I used Granny Apple Green cardstock, and I used the two-tone, so I have the light side and the dark side. And then I just alternated. So I used the dark veining with the light leaf and vice versa. So I have a bunch of the small ones and a bunch of the large ones. I glued the pieces together already, so they are ready to add to my page. And then my other leaves here, this is also a set from close to my heart called Palm Paradise. It has several different leaf layering sets. There's a solid and an outline. So I stamped the solid in Lemon Lime Twist, and then I did the outline in the Granny Apple Green, which is a nice little two-tone look, gives me some shading or some variation in the green color. I love how these turned out. I also did lots of those. Now all my flowers for this one are the same as what Jayma used, the Happy Hibiscus set. This one also has a 3D hybrid embossing folder. Now you can cut these 3 flowers at the same time and emboss them because the die just fits into the embossing folder. Now it doesn't like click in, it just kind of nests in there so that you know you have it in the right place. You put your paper on top and then you run it through. Same sandwich as I talked about for the other hybrid embossing folder with the sand dollars. It's a really nice option, and I followed what Jayma did and did a couple different variations on my flowers. There's also some of these small flowers which I have here, and I will show you how I inked those. There's 2 different sizes and I did a whole bunch of them because they're nice and little and easy to tuck into small places. Okay, so our first off for the stamp layering one, I think it works the best to stamp your outline first because it gives you something to aim for when you're stamping the fill, the more solid image. So you do kind of need to get your head right up over top, look through the stamp and make sure you have it lined up. Now this will change a little bit. It will lighten and fade and kind of smooth out as it dries. And then for this one, I'm going to use my blending brush. I'm going to start out very lightly just in the middle. I don't want to take it right to the edge, but I'm just swirling that around, and I'll keep layering until I get it as dark as I want it. And then for our little flowers, I'm going to go in with a really small blending brush. This is one that I got off of Amazon in a little set, and it works really good for these tiny little areas. I'm dipping into Daffodil Delight, and I'm just gonna go in some circular motions, starting off with really light pressure because I'm trying not to create too much of a giant polka dot in the middle. I do want to blend this out. So start off with light pressure, and then as there's less ink on there, you can kind of increase the pressure and blend outwards, just like that. Now there are little score lines on these flowers. So if you want to, you can fold the little petals inward on those little score lines and give some shape to your little flowers. I think that's a fun thing to do. Of course, anytime you shape flowers, some of that's going to get squished out when you put it into your album, but I find they usually retain some of their shape. Okay, now that we've had a look at all the individual elements that I'm going to be using, we can start layering these together. Okay, when I'm starting off building a cluster, I want to start with my largest elements first, and then layer in the smaller elements to fill in any gaps and kind of even things out. So let's start with our cluster down here first. And I want to use a large sand dollar, so I know that's going to be somewhere in the main part of my cluster. I also want to use probably 3 of my flowers, and I want to mix in the ones that are ink blended and the ones that are stamped. Now, once we have flowers kind of placed, it's always a good idea to start adding some leaves because those usually naturally come out from flowers. Not sure how many leaves I want here, or if that one is too big. Might be too big. Let's start with a smaller one and then see. Okay, I want to repeat that palm leaf down here. Oh, and I do want to bring in some coral, so I should do that before I get too far along here. Now I'm thinking below here because I could come out to the side, but that's kind of creating more of a triangle shape, and I still want to leave room for my title. So I'm thinking I might be better off to lift my photo and stick it under on this side. Even though it's white on white, it gives some nice texture. Not everything has to be super bold and full of contrast. I feel like I do need some more visual weight down here, so let's add these green leaves. A lot of building your clusters is just playing around, trying things in different locations. You really don't know until you try and just see what happens. And I do think there's more than one right place for embellishments, so it's not like you're trying to find the perfect location. You're just trying to find a location that you like. I'm keeping in mind my overall shape of my cluster. And I don't necessarily want this to get too out of hand. I mean, the clusters on these pages are going to be big because I'm using a lot of embellishments, a lot of different embellishments, and I want to repeat those elements from cluster to cluster. Repetition is key to make everything kind of fit in and feel cohesive. I'm liking how this is looking. So now I'm just going to add, I think, a couple small little elements. That is why it's so good to have different sizes to work with. Definitely small, medium, large, but I think the more variety you can have, the better. I'm also trying to offset pieces. So where I have repetition, you see I have 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I have 2 of those palm leaves, but you can see I have green up here, green down there. I'm not going to repeat this coral element because it would just make this arrangement so big. I could cut a small piece and tuck it up here if I wanted to, and that would look really nice as well. Really is just about playing and trying things out. So the story behind these photos is that this is our first trip as a family of 3, kind of like a big trip, right? Where we were flying on an airplane. It was Isabella's first time on an airplane, and which went really well, by the way. She absolutely loves flying, which is great because we plan to definitely be doing more of that. But something I love to do is watch the sunset. And since this was our first family trip, somehow, whether it was through special dinners that were going on or whatever, I hadn't taken any pictures of the sunset. I hadn't gotten any of those nice like golden hour photos. It really is the best light when that sun is setting over the ocean and everything just looks more beautiful. So I made it a point on our very last night that we had to go a little bit early to dinner and stop by the beach and take some photos. By this point, Isabella was so done. She was just like, you know what, leave me alone. She found a stick and she just wanted to carry that stick everywhere. She was drawing in the sand. She was jumping around with it, balancing it on her head. I'm like, I'm just trying to take some beautiful portraits here. Like, can you just stand still and smile or look into the distance or something? So the process of getting these photos wasn't quite as picturesque as the photos themselves, but I'm really glad that I made the extra effort, made the point to be like, hey, I really want to get sunset photos. And yes, I do have way more photos than I'm putting on these pages. Probably won't do a second layout, but maybe I need to throw a little Pocket Plus divider in between here. Those are retired supply from Close to My Heart. Basically allows you to add extra photos to your layout by adding like a pocket in between, a pocket page in between. But we'll see. I picked some of my favorites to put on here. That might just have to be good enough. Now that I have my embellishments pretty much figured out, I want to think about a title. So I went to go look through my alphabets, and I think this Moxie alphabet will look really fun. Maybe layered over my photo, or maybe just below my photo. I might even mix alphabets. But I think for sure I want the first word to be out of the Moxie alphabet. It has coordinating dies and stamps, so I'm going to stamp them first and then die cut them. Now when it comes to colors, I don't think I want to go with pink because I have so much pink going on here. So that really only leaves me a couple of options. I have some little hints of yellow and I also have some orange. So I'm thinking if I bring in a little bit more of those colors, it'll tie in the little bit of yellow and orange we have going on over into our title. This is Sunset, and I think I want my title to say Last Sunset because it was the last sunset of our trip. So I was either thinking Maui Sunset or Last Sunset, but this is going to be an album full of Maui pictures, so I don't think Maui Sunset really makes sense. So I have Daffodil Delight and Timid Tiger, which are the yellow and the orange that I've used on here already. I'm going to stamp in the yellow, and then I want to do kind of like a sunset or ombre. So I'm grabbing an inking tool and I'm just going to add ink. It's hard because you can't really see what you're doing until you stamp it. So I might have to do a few until I get what I want. So I'm just going to wipe the ink off of here because I don't want to get orange into my yellow. Stamp that again. And then I'm just pouncing. Light pressure. I think I got a little bit higher that time. There we go, that's better. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. If you want it to be smoother in the transition, you need to grab another inking tool and then go into the yellow and pounce before you stamp. So ink up in yellow, pounce with the orange, and then also pounce with yellow right where the yellow and the orange meet, and that will soften out any line. I don't think I really care too much, so I'm going to leave it just as it is. I'm going to go ahead, stamp all my letters, and then I'll die cut them. All right, let's bring this in. So I have my word last, and then I cut the word sunset out of Secret Sea Cardstock and using the mini alphabet die from Stampin' Up. I love this die because it gives you a nice clean little font that goes with so many things, and it's one solid die, so it cuts out all together. I put it on some washi tape. I just line the letters up on my mat and then put my washi tape over top to grab it so that I can kind of move it around. I'm not sure if I want to layer it over my title or under my title, over here, over here. The other option I was thinking was maybe up on top of my photo, and then with this either lay it over top or right below it. Everything is stuck down. I decided to do my title like this, and I popped up these letters, and then these ones are just flat. It's really helpful to use the washi tape to help position all these little letters. It makes sticking down a title really fast and easy. I'm going to use the same gems that Jayma did, the iridescent foil gems, and I'm just placing those in the center of my little flowers. Also in the center of my medium-sized flowers, just using my Picket tool to help me place those. It adds just a nice little twinkle. I also wanted to bring in some gold highlights. So I'm using the Spectrum Noir liquid gold metallic paint markers. These are actual paint markers, so you need to make sure you shake them. And this is the fine tip one, and I'm just adding little dots to all of these large hibiscus flowers. And then I'm also going to fill in a little bit in the center here, just to add a little bit more pop of gold. I'll also add some little gold dots on my other flowers. I decided I wanted to print out my journaling, so I used the Avery matte clear shipping labels. And it did take some figuring out. I always print it out on printer paper first so that I can check the sizing of where I'm going. One thing to keep in mind is it always looks a little bit darker when you print it out on this paper compared to your printer paper. And now the tricky part is getting it exactly where I want it. I did have to pry up some of these flowers just a little bit to be able to sneak this under here. And because I have place these layers here, I just want to make sure that they're not going to be covering up my words. So I'm keeping an eye on where my end is going to be. I'm going to line it up with the end of this piece. And then I also need to leave a gap there as well, just so that nothing is overlapping my words. There are cuts on the back of this, so it helps you peel that off. And I'm going to try just peeling half off and see if that's a little bit easier to deal with while I'm trying to place this. Okay, then I can fold that back and grab the other part. I love how that seamlessly becomes part of the page. And now I have pretty printed journaling on my page. Now the final touch that Jayma added on hers was some gold splatter, and I do feel like it would work really well on here. It's going to be a little bit tricky not to get it everywhere, but I'm going to try. I do have some extra pieces of printer paper from all my practices and cutting out my journaling. So I'm just going to use that to try and mask off the things that I don't want to get gold splatter on. And I was thinking it'd be fun if this matched the gold pen that I used for the detailing. So I just took the chisel end of this size marker. It comes in a 3-pack, and I just hold it down to get the paint kind of flowing out in a puddle. And I just need enough so I can splatter it. I'm also going to mask this off. Don't need a ton. You'll want to make sure to let this fully dry. Because this is a paint, it does take a little bit longer to dry. So I'm going to show you a close-up, and then I will leave these sitting out and not move them for a little while to make sure everything is dried fully. So hopefully you can see that reflection coming off the splatter, and also the details on the flowers, a little bit of the gold paper peeking through, the glitter in the gems that are in the center of those flowers. I'm really glad I decided not to put my title on top of my photo, because I think it would have closed it off too much. It would have taken away from the largeness that I kind of feel in this photo. This looks way bigger, more expansive, more impressive. As soon as I put that title on and had 3 things overlapping my photo, it just didn't look as good anymore. So there is the second cluster there. And our little ombre title. I love how that turned out. I think the contrast of the yellow and orange are really nice as well. Really pop out of the background. There you can see that gold reflect a little bit better. And then our big cluster over on this side. I am so happy with how this layout turned out. Make sure you go check out this playlist here and see what everyone else has been scrap lifting from Jayma, and I will see you again soon in another video.